a route stretching over 4,000 miles, where camel caravans traveled for months through scorching deserts and freezing mountain passes, where Chinese silk met Indian spices and Persian carpets. This wasn't just a trade route. It was a bridge between civilizations. It carried Buddhism from India to China, Islam to Central Asia, ideas, technology, and culture across continents. Today, we're exploring the complete history of the Silk Road, the world's most famous and important trade network. Let's begin. What was the Silk Road? First, let's understand this crucial fact. The Silk Road wasn't a single road. It was a vast network of trade routes connecting China with the Mediterranean Sea linking east, Asia with Europe, and the Middle East. Why was it called the Silk Road? Because Chinese silk was the most valuable and sought-after commodity traded along these routes. Europeans were obsessed with silk, considering it almost magical. They had no idea how it was made and were willing to pay fortunes for it. The term Silk Road itself wasn't actually used in ancient times. It was coined in the 19th century by German geographer Ferdinand von Richthofen. Ancient traders knew these routes by various local names. How long was it? Approximately 6,400 kilometers, or 4,000 miles roughly, the distance from New York to London. But here's the key. No single trader traveled the entire route. Goods passed from merchant to merchant, city to city, gradually making their way from China to Rome over months or even years. When did it begin? The Silk Road officially began around 130 BC, about 2,150 years ago, during China's Han Dynasty. However, small-scale trade existed even earlier along parts of these routes. When did it end? Around 1450 CE, when Europeans discovered sea routes. To Asia and the Ottoman Empire controlled the overland passages. So overall, the Silk Road connected civilizations for approximately 1,500 years, one of the longest-lasting trade networks in human history. The Han Dynasty, why the official beginning of the Silk Road, has a fascinating origin story. In 130 BCE, Chinese Emperor Wu of the Han Dynasty sent a diplomat named Zhang Qian on a dangerous mission. His goal: forge military alliances with Central Asian tribes to help China defend against their enemies, the Xiongnu nomads, who constantly raided China's borders. Zhang Qian's personal journey was a disaster. He was captured by the Xiongnu and held prisoner for 10 years. But when he finally escaped and returned to China, he brought back invaluable intelligence. He described powerful kingdoms in Central Asia, the goods they traded, and most importantly, the routes to reach them safely. Emperor Wu realized this. Region offered enormous opportunities, not just for military alliances, but for trade and wealth. The secret of Chinese silk: at this time, China held a monopoly on silk production. No one outside China knew how silk was made. Europeans believed it grew on trees or was spun by mysterious creatures. The reality: silk comes from silkworms that feed on mulberry leaves. Chinese guards protected this secret zealously. Anyone caught smuggling silkworms or their eggs out of China faced the death penalty. This monopoly made Chinese silk extraordinarily expensive. In the Roman Empire, silk was worth more than gold by weight. Only the wealthiest Romans could afford silk garments, and Roman senators actually tried to ban silk wearing because it was draining so much gold from the treasury to pay Chinese merchants. The profit margins were astronomical. A bolt of silk bought in China for a few coins could be sold in Rome for enough to buy a small house. This incredible value made the dangerous journey across deserts and mountains worthwhile for merchants. Routes and major cities. As mentioned, the Silk Road was a network of routes. 3 main paths dominated. 1. Northern route. This route left China, skirted along the Tian Shan mountain range, passed through major Central Asian cities like Samarkand and Bokhara, and continued to the Black Sea and Constantinople. 2. Central route. This path followed the edges of the Taklamakan Desert, one of the world's most hostile environments. Merchants depended on oases for water and rest. Many caravans perished in sandstorms. 3. Southern route. This route went along the Tibetan Plateau's edge, connecting with India and Afghanistan, before continuing west. Key cities along the Silk Road. Chang'an, modern Xi'an, China, the starting point, capital of the Han and later Tang dynasties. Merchants gathered here before beginning their westward journeys. At its peak, Chang'an was the world's largest city with over 1 million inhabitants. Dunhuang, China, a crucial oasis city where the three main routes diverged. Home to the famous Mogao caves with hundreds of Buddhist grottos containing 1,000-year-old manuscripts and artwork. Kashgar, Xinjiang, China, a major junction where northern and southern routes converged. Even today, its Sunday market is one of the world's oldest continuously operating markets. Samarkand, Uzbekistan, the heart of the Silk Road. This city became so wealthy, it was called the Pearl of the Eastern Islamic world. Timur, Temurling, made it his capital and built stunning architecture that still stands today. Bukhara, Uzbekistan, another crucial Central Asian city and center of Islamic learning. The famous scientist and physician Ibn Sina, Avicenna, came from here. Merv, Turkmenistan, once one of the world's largest cities with perhaps 200,000 inhabitants, tragically destroyed by the Mongols in 1221. Baghdad, Iraq, capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, home to the House of Wisdom, where scholars from across the world gathered to translate and preserve knowledge. Constantinople, Istanbul, Turkey, capital of the Byzantine Empire, a final major stop before goods entered European markets. Taxila, Pakistan, an important junction between India and Central Asia, home to one of the ancient world's great universities where Greek, Persian, and Indian scholars studied together. Every major city along the route featured caravanserais, fortified inns where merchants could rest, stable their animals, trade goods, and exchange information. These became crucial nodes in the trading network. Trade goods. What was traded? Now for the most fascinating part, what actually traveled along the Silk Road. From China, east to west, silk, obviously the star commodity porcelain. Chinese ceramics were unmatched in quality paper, a Chinese invention that revolutionized record-keeping gunpowder. Initially used for fireworks, later changed warfare tea, became beloved in Central Asia, and eventually Europeliquor, beautifully polished wooden items, iron and steel tools. Chinese metallurgy was advanced from Central Asia and the Middle East. Horses, particularly prized, were the heavenly horses of Fergana, powerful war horses that Chinese emperors desperately wanted. Carpets. Persian rugs were luxury items. Glass, Syrian and Egyptian glass-making techniques were superior textiles. Woolen and cotton fabrics, precious stones, lapis lazuli, turquoise, emeralds, gold, and silver from India. Spices, black pepper, cinnamon, cardamom. These were worth their weight in gold in Europe. Cotton fabrics. Indian muslin and calico were renowned for their quality. Gems, diamonds, and rubies. Ivory, medicinal herbs and medicines. From Europe, west to east. Gold and silver coins. Payment for Eastern goods. Wool. European wool was high-quality olive oil wine glassware. From Venice, the most important trade. Ideas and technology beyond physical goods. The Silk Road's greatest cargo was knowledge. Paper-making technology traveled from China to the Islamic world, then to Europe. Printing, block printing, and eventually movable type gunpowder transformed warfare globally. The compass revolutionized navigation. Mathematics. Indian numerals 0 to 9 reached Europe via the Arab world, which is why we call them Arabic numerals, medical knowledge, techniques and medicines exchanged between cultures, astronomical observations, shared and improved upon. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder complained that the Roman Empire was spending so much gold on Chinese silk that it was damaging the economy. The Roman Senate even tried to ban silk wearing unsuccessfully. Of course, Marco Polo's legendary journey of the Silk Road's most famous traveler? Marco Polo, the Venetian merchant who became a legend. In 1271-753 years ago, 17-year-old Marco Polo set out from Venice with his father Niccolo and uncle Nafayo. They were heading to the court of Kublai Khan, the Mongol emperor of China. The trip took 3.5 years. They traveled through the Middle East, the scorching deserts of Persia, the Pamir Mountains called the roof of the world, where Marco noted that fire burned less brightly due to thin air. Gobi Desert, finally reaching Kublai Khan's summer palace. In Chengdu, Xanadu, Marco Polo was traveling during the Mongol Empire's peak. The Mongols, despite their fearsome reputation, had made the Silk Road safer than ever before. At Kublai Khan's court, Kublai Khan was impressed by young Marco Polo. He employed him in his administration and sent him on diplomatic missions throughout the empire. Marco traveled to Burma, Myanmar, India, Indonesia, Tibet. Throughout China, Marco Polo remained in Kublai Khan's service for 17 years. When he finally returned to Venice in 1295, to 24 years after leaving, his own family didn't recognize him. They thought he had died decades ago. The travels of Marco Polo. Later, Marco Polo was captured during a war between Venice and Genoa. In prison, he dictated his travel stories to a writer named Rustichello da Pisa. The result, The Travels of Marco Polo, one of the most influential books in history. Marco described wonders Europeans couldn't believe. Paper money. Europe only used metal coins. Coal, unknown as fuel in Europe. Asbestos cloth, which wouldn't burn. Kublai Khan's magnificent palace. The vast size and sophistication of Chinese cities. A postal system more efficient than anything in Europe. Finally reaching Kublai Khan's summer palace. Many Europeans thought Marco Polo was lying. The things he described seemed too fantastic. But his book inspired curiosity about the East. 2 centuries later, Christopher Columbus owned a copy of Marco Polo's book. When Columbus sailed west trying to reach Asia, he was actually trying to find the lands Marco Polo had described. Modern historians debate whether Marco Polo actually reached China. Some point out his absence from Chinese records. However, most evidence suggests his journey was real, though he may have exaggerated some details. Religion and cultural exchange. The Silk Road wasn't just about commerce, was history's greatest highway of ideas, religions, and culture. This may be its most important legacy. The spread of Buddhism. Buddhism originated in India with Gautama Buddha around 500 BCE, but Buddhism's expansion across Asia happened because of the Silk Road. Buddhist monks traveled along these routes, establishing monasteries, translating texts, and teaching. From the 1st century CE onward, Buddhism spread into Central Asia through the Tarim Basin into China, 2nd-3rd century CE, then to Korea and Japan. Cities like Dunhuang and Bamiyan, Afghanistan, became major Buddhist centers with magnificent cave temples. Sadly, the Taliban destroyed Bamiyan's giant Buddha statues in 2001. Without the Silk Road, Chinese Buddhism, and by extension Korean and Japanese Buddhism, wouldn't exist. The spread of Islam. When Islam emerged in the 7th century, the Silk Road became crucial to its expansion. Arab merchants and Sufi missionaries traveled these routes, reaching Persia, quickly converted after Muslim conquest. Central Asian cities like Samarkand and Bukhara became Islamic centers. Western China, Muslim communities established. The Silk Road cities developed distinctive Islamic architecture, magnificent mosques, madrasas, schools, and mausoleums that still stand today. Christianity's Eastern journey. Nestorian Christianity also traveled the Silk Road to China. By the 7th century, Christian communities existed in Chinese cities. The Nestorian stele, discovered in Xi'an, is a stone monument with Christian teachings in Chinese and Syriac from 781 CE. Scientific and technological exchange. The Silk Road created history's greatest knowledge exchange. Greek science and philosophy merged with Indian and Chinese knowledge. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad. Scholars translated Greek texts into Arabic, added their own research, and this knowledge later returned to Europe. Mathematics. Indian numerals traveled through the Arab world to Europe. Astronomy. Chinese, Indian, Persian, and Greek astronomical observations or combined medicine, medical. Knowledge from multiple traditions merged. The famous physician Ibn Sina, Avicenna, synthesized Greek and Islamic medicine. Chemistry developed from combining different traditions. Language and writing. Sogdian, the language of Central Asian merchants, became the lingua franca of the Silk Road like English today. Paper-making technology traveled from China to the Islamic world after the Battle of Talas in 751 CE, where Chinese prisoners taught Arabs the technique. Food and agriculture, even crops, traveled the Silk Road. Grapes and alfalfa from Central Asia to China. Peaches and apricots from China westward. Spices from India. Globally, pasta may have traveled from China to Italy, though this is debated. This cultural exchange was the Silk Road's greatest legacy. Civilizations learned from each other, creating a more connected and advanced world. The Mongol Empire, the Golden Age in the 13th century. Genghis Khan created the largest contiguous land empire in history. And surprisingly, this was the Silk Road's Golden Age. Pax Mongolica, Mongol peace. The Mongols were incredibly brutal during conquest. They destroyed cities and killed millions. But once they controlled territory, they did something remarkable. They made trade safer than ever before. Genghis Khan valued commerce. He protected merchant caravans from bandits, executed thieves, and raiders, swiftly established standardized weights and measures, created the Yan system, postal relay stations every 25 miles, where messengers could get fresh horses. For the first time, a merchant could travel from China to the Mediterranean within a single empire. The risk of robbery or arbitrary taxation was minimized. This period, called Pax Mongolica, was the Silk Road's peak. Marco Polo benefited from this safety during his travels. Trade flourished under Mongol rule. Trade volume increased dramatically. New goods were exchanged. Information traveled faster than ever. Exchanges became common. Cultural fusion accelerated. But then came decline. Several factors ended the Silk Road's dominance. 1. Mongol Empire fragmentation, 1300s. After Kublai Khan's death, the Mongol Empire split into competing khanates that fought each other. The unified security disappeared. 2. The Black Death, 1340s. This is perhaps the Silk Road's darkest legacy. Bubonic plague, carried by fleas on rats, traveled from Central Asia to Europe along trade routes. Between 1347 to 1353, the plague killed 30 to 60% of Europe's population, approximately 75 to 200 million people worldwide. It was one of human history's greatest catastrophes. After the Black Death, trade along the Silk Road plummeted. People feared travel and contact with distant regions. 3. The Ottoman Empire, 1453. When the Ottoman Turks conquered Constantinople in 1453, they imposed heavy taxes on European merchants using the land routes. This made overland trade expensive and difficult. European traders desperately sought alternative routes to Asian goods. 4. The Age of Exploration, 1500s. Portuguese and Spanish explorers discovered sea routes. Vasco da Gama reached India by sea. In 1498, Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas in 1492 while trying to reach Asia. Sea trade was faster, safer, and cheaper than overland caravans. Ships could carry far more goods than camels. By the 1500s, the Silk Road as a major trade route was essentially finished. The era of global maritime trade had begun. Legacy and modern IMP today, the Silk Road no longer functions as a trade route. But its legacy is profound and lasting. Cultural legacy. When you visit Central Asian cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, or Isfahan, you see the Silk Road's marks everywhere. Magnificent mosques and madrasas, Buddhist cave temples, ancient caravanserais, bazaars that have operated for centuries. Architecture blending Chinese, Persian, Indian, and Arabic styles. The cultural fusion we see across Asia, the mixing of Chinese, Persian, Indian, and Arab influences is the Silk Road's result. Modern revival. Belt and Road Initiative. In 2013, China launched the Belt and Road Initiative, BRIA, often called the New Silk Road. This massive infrastructure project involves China building roads, railways, ports, and pipelines across dozens of countries. The BRI follows ancient Silk Road routes, attempting to recreate the economic connections that once linked East and West with. China at the center. Tourism and heritage today. Silk Road tourism is booming. UNESCO has designated numerous Silk Road sites as World Heritage Sites. Samarkand's Registan Square, Bibara's historic center, Changan, Xi'an, and the Terracotta Army Dunhuangs. Mogao Caves, Taxila, in Pakistan. Archaeological discoveries. Archaeologists continue discovering Silk Road treasures. Mummies in the Tarim Basin, manuscripts in desert caves, and ancient cities buried by sand reveal new information constantly. Academic interest. Universities worldwide offer Silk Road studies. This ancient network teaches us about cultural exchange and tolerance, economic integration, the spread of ideas, how civilizations develop through contact. Silk Road proves that isolation limits progress. Advancement comes from sharing ideas and learning from different cultures. Silk Road was more than a trade route. It was a bridge between civilizations that transformed human history. This network demonstrates what happens when cultures interact openly. Science advances, art flourishes, technology spreads, and understanding grows. Everything we take for granted today traveled the Silk Road. The numbers we use, the paper we write on, the compass that guides us, the gunpowder that changed warfare, spices in our food, tea in our cups, and silk in our closets. Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity all spread along these routes. Greek philosophy met Chinese thought. Indian mathematics reached Europe through the Arab world. Ideas that shape our modern world were exchanged along this ancient network. The Silk Road proves that progress comes from openness, not isolation. From sharing ideas, not hoarding them. From learning from others, not fearing them. Today's globalized world, where we use Chinese smartphones, eat Italian pasta, and watch American movies, is actually an extension of the Silk Road concept. The idea that goods, ideas, and cultures should flow freely is the Silk Road's enduring legacy. So next time you wear silk, drink tea, or write on paper, remember, these all came via routes that camel caravans crossed 2,000 years ago, connecting civilizations and changing the world forever. This was the Silk Road, the route that connected the world, the path that changed history, the bridge between East and West. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe for more history content. Let me know in the comments, what historical topic should I cover next? Thank you for watching.